Let's talk about something that's quietly reshaping our work lives, workplace monitoring. With remote work and incredibly powerful new AI, companies have this unprecedented view into what we do all day. But where's the line? Where does helpful management stop and invasive surveillance begin? Let's dig in. This quote, it just cuts right to the core of the issue, doesn't it? A tool that's brought in to enforce the rules can quietly change the whole point of a job, shifting our focus from, doing creative, meaningful work to just checking the boxes. So here's how we're going to break this down. First up, we'll look at the technology itself, what we're calling the all-seeing eye. Then we'll dive into the psychological fallout, the trust collapse it can cause, and how that feeds a dangerous control spiral. From there, we'll tally up the hidden costs to a business. And finally, we'll try to figure out where that boundary is between helping and harming. Okay, so what are we really talking about here when we say workplace monitoring? Because it's a whole lot more than just a manager peeking over your shoulder these days. The official term for this is electronic performance monitoring, or EPM for short. It's basically any system that uses technology to watch, record, and analyze data about how we work. And this can be anything, right? From tracking our mouse clicks to analyzing the sentiment in our emails. What's really wild is just how fast this has all evolved. I mean, it started out pretty basic with surveillance 1.0, simple analog stuff. Then came 2.0, recording keystrokes and clicks. That morphed into 3.0, tracking our emails and web browsing. Now, with 4.0, we've got cheap IoT sensors everywhere. And today we're in the age of 5.0, where algorithms are making automated decisions about us. The result of all this is a huge increase in what researchers call monitoring density. And the reason this is such a hot topic right now is pretty simple: the massive shift to remote and hybrid work. A lot of organizations, feeling uncertain about productivity when they can't see their people, have turned to these super sophisticated tools to, keep tabs. But here's the thing. This technology isn't neutral. Installing monitoring software is not like installing a new printer. It sends a really powerful psychological signal, and our brains react to that signal in some very predictable ways. One of the key ideas here is something called psychological reactance theory. It basically says that when we feel like a freedom, like the autonomy to just do our job our own way, is being threatened, our gut instinct is to push back. We actually get motivated to try and get that freedom back, sometimes by defying the system or even doing counterproductive things like cheating the metrics or deliberately slowing down. And this perfectly captures the central tension, doesn't it? When you're given autonomy, it taps into your internal drive, that intrinsic motivation to solve a puzzle or create something new. But when a management style is based on control, which EPM often is, it just signals distrust. And that flips a switch in our brains, shifting our motivation from an internal desire to do great work to an external pressure to just follow the rules. So the bottom line is that intense monitoring is rarely seen as just a tool. To a lot of people, it's a message from their employer that flat out says, "We don't trust you." And that can feel like a major breach of the unwritten psychological contract, that set of mutual expectations that holds the whole employer-employee relationship together. And that breach of trust, it's not a one-time thing. It can actually kick off this really destructive, self-reinforcing feedback loop that some call the control spiral. Let's just walk through this cycle. It all starts with uncertainty. Let's say that sudden shift to remote work. Management feels like they're losing control, so they roll out monitoring tools. As we just saw, that erodes employee trust. So what happens next? Well, people's behavior changes. They start focusing only on the things that are being measured. Their work becomes performative. And ironically, this just creates a mask of productivity, which makes management even more uncertain than they were before, leading them to clamp down with even more monitoring. And on the spiral goes. At the very heart of this whole spiral is a simple management desire to feel less vulnerable. But in trying to achieve that, they unintentionally end up swapping out the very foundation of a great work relationship, which is trust, for the cold, hard architecture of technological control. So what's the actual damage? What does this breakdown of trust and the rise of performative work really cost a company? Well, the consequences go way beyond just bad morale. Yeah, the research shows a very clear performance drag. Surveillance tanks, psychological safety, that feeling that it's okay to take a risk or make a mistake without being punished. And when that's gone, people stop experimenting. They stop innovating. It crushes autonomy, which we know is a huge driver of motivation. It can even make employees hide their best ideas. And of course, it consistently triggers anxiety and can push people to cheat the system just to hit their numbers. And if you actually look at the data from multiple huge studies, a really interesting picture emerges. The impact on employee stress is consistently, significantly negative. It just goes up. But what about performance, the whole reason for doing this? Well, for simple, repetitive tasks, the results are kind of all over the place, maybe a tiny positive bump. But for complex, creative, problem-solving work, the kind of work most of us do, the effect on performance is often negative.
So, does all of this mean that any and all monitoring is just bad? Well, no, not necessarily. The technology itself is neutral. The real question is how it's being used, and even more importantly, why. This table really is the key to the whole thing. It lays it all out. When monitoring is used for a developmental purpose, say to give you feedback so you can learn and grow, it can actually build trust. When it's for administrative and safety reasons, like making sure people are following safety rules on a factory floor, the impact is usually neutral. But when it's just plain surveillance, monitoring for monitoring's sake with no clear shared goal, the impact on trust is almost always negative.
So it turns out the real problem isn't the monitoring itself. It's the lack of transparency. The real question is the implementation clear? Do people know what's being tracked and why? Is this a tool to help them get better, or is it a tool to control them? That's what makes all the difference.
And this brings us right to the final, crucial question that every leader really ought to be asking themselves. Are the systems you're putting in place building the confidence and psychological safety your team needs to do great work, or are they just enforcing compliance? Because as all the evidence shows, control is not the same thing as confidence.